Jack Mason never expected much from fixing a simple garage light. The widowed handyman had been scraping by in Cedar Falls, raising his 9-year-old son Tyler on whatever repair jobs came his way. When Maya Sterling bought the old Hillcrest mansion, folks whispered about the young billionaire woman who'd made her fortune in tech and now wanted a quiet weekend retreat. Jack figured she'd be another wealthy outsider who'd call him once and disappear back to the city. But as he balanced on that shaky ladder, toolbox rattling, sweat beading on his forehead, Maya watched him work with genuine fascination. Then she said something that caught him completely off guard. "You're handsome. You know that?" What started as an awkward moment between a struggling single father and a billionaire heiress would become something neither expected. Would a woman who could buy anything she wanted choose the one thing money couldn't purchase? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the dawn quiet at 5:30, same as every weekday for the past 3 years. Jack Mason's calloused hand found the snooze button with practiced precision, stealing 9 more minutes of peace before the day demanded his attention. Through the thin walls of their 2-bedroom rental, he could hear Tyler stirring in the next room, probably already awake and reading one of his space books by the window light. Jack's feet hit the cold linoleum floor, a familiar shock that helped shake off the remnants of sleep. The house felt smaller each morning, cramped with the accumulated weight of making do with less. In the kitchen, he started the coffee maker, a wedding gift from Sarah's mother that still worked despite its age. Pulled out the ingredients for Tyler's lunch. Peanut butter and jelly again, though he'd dress it up with apple slices and a note tucked inside the brown paper bag. "Morning, Dad." Tyler appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his school clothes, sandy hair sticking up in 3 different directions. At 9, he carried himself with the quiet maturity of a boy who'd learned early that life didn't always go according to plan. His arms cradled a thick hardcover book about the International Space Station, pages already dog-eared from multiple readings. "Morning, astronaut." Jack ruffled his son's hair, smoothing down the cowlicks with fatherly efficiency. "Sleep well?" "Did you know that astronauts on the space station see 16 sunrises and sunsets every day?" Tyler's eyes lit up with the wonder that made Jack's chest tighten with pride and worry in equal measure. The boy had inherited his mother's curiosity about the world, her hunger for knowledge that stretched beyond the boundaries of their small town. "I did not know that. Sounds like they're pretty busy up there." Jack handed Tyler a glass of orange juice and slid the lunch bag across the counter. "Speaking of busy, Mrs. Patterson says you've been helping her with the class reading circle." Tyler's cheeks reddened slightly. Some of the kids are having trouble with the harder words. "It's not their fault. The books are tricky." There it was. Again, that instinct to help others, to make things better. Sarah's compassion lived on in their son, a daily reminder of the woman who'd shaped both their lives before cancer took her away. Jack sometimes wondered if Tyler remembered enough about his mother, if the stories and photos were sufficient to keep her memory alive in a growing boy's mind. Cedar Falls stretched out beyond their kitchen window, a town of 8,000 souls. Nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, Main Street boasted a diner that served the best apple pie in 3 counties, a hardware store that still kept penny candy near the register, and a library that hosted story time every Saturday morning. It was the kind of place where neighbors still looked out for each other, where a man could raise a child with the confidence that the whole community would help keep watch. But it was also the kind of place where opportunities came slowly, where a skilled handyman might go weeks between jobs, depending on the season and the economy. Jack had learned to stretch every dollar, to fix what could be fixed and make do with what couldn't. The truck parked outside bore the dents and scratches of honest work, its toolbox filled with instruments that had belonged to his father and grandfather before him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Tyler's voice carried that careful tone children use when they're testing the waters of a sensitive topic. Double quotes, always, buddy. What's on your mind? Do you think Mom would have liked the space station? I mean, if she could have visited? Jack set down his coffee mug, giving the question the weight it deserved. Sarah had been a teacher, fascinated by the natural world and the mysteries it contained. She'd encouraged Tyler's interest in astronomy from the time he could hold a picture book, pointing out constellations during summer camping trips and checking out library books about planets and stars. I think your mom would have loved everything about it, Jack said carefully. She always said the most amazing things happened when people worked together to reach for something bigger than themselves. The space station is exactly that kind of dream. Tyler nodded, satisfied with the answer. He returned to his book, reading aloud about orbital mechanics while Jack finished packing lunches and gathering the tools he'd need for the day's work. The routine felt sacred in its simplicity. Father and son preparing to face the world together, armed with love and determination. The call had come the previous evening, just as Jack was helping Tyler with math homework. The voice on the other end belonged to Miss Sterling, the new owner of the old Hillcrest mansion. She'd explained that she was having trouble with a garage light, something about the fixture not responding to the switch. Jack had quoted his standard rate and arranged to stop by after dropping Tyler at school. The Hillcrest property sat on 12 acres at the edge of town, a sprawling Victorian estate that had been empty for nearly 2 years after old Mr. Hillcrest passed away. The house itself was a masterpiece of 19th century craftsmanship, with wraparound porches and gabled windows that caught the morning light like jewels. Jack had driven past it countless times, wondering what kind of person would eventually claim such a place. According to the gossip at Murphy's Diner, Mai Sterling had paid cash for the property, sight unseen. She was young, somewhere in her early 30s, and had made her fortune in technology, something to do with software that helped companies manage their data. The details were fuzzy, filtered through the telephone game of small-town speculation. But the basics were clear enough. She was wealthy, she was single, and she was planning to use the mansion as a weekend retreat from her primary residence in Manhattan. Jack had met his share of wealthy weekenders over the years, folks who bought properties in Cedar Falls for the scenic views and country charm, then disappeared back to their city lives until the next picturesque weekend called to them. They tended to be demanding clients, impatient with small-town pace, and quick to assume that higher prices meant better service. He'd learned to be professional but cautious, to do good work without getting too invested in their temporary presence. The school bus rounded the corner at precisely 7:45, its yellow bulk familiar and reassuring. Tyler gathered his backpack and lunch, pausing to give his father a quick hug before heading out the door. Jack watched from the kitchen window as his son climbed aboard, settling into a seat near the front where he could read during the 20-minute ride to Cedar Falls Elementary. The day stretched ahead with its usual mix of possibilities and challenges. After the Hillcrest job, Jack had a leaky faucet to fix at the Andersons' place and a squeaky door hinge that had been bothering Mrs. Chun for weeks. Small jobs, but they added up to a living wage when combined with the occasional larger project. Winter was coming, which meant furnace maintenance calls and the first whispers of holiday decorating jobs for the businesses along Main Street. Jack loaded his tools into the truck, checking twice to make sure he had everything he might need for a simple electrical repair. The morning air carried the crisp promise of autumn, leaves beginning their slow turn from green to gold. In a few weeks, the tourists would arrive for the annual Fall Foliage Festival, bringing their cameras and their money to Cedar Falls. Usually picked up extra work during the festival season, helping local businesses prepare for the influx of visitors. The drive to Hillcrest took him through the heart of town, past the elementary school where Tyler was probably already settling, into his first period classroom. Jack waved to Mrs. Murphy, who was setting up the daily specials board outside her diner, and nodded to Pete Kowalski, who was opening his hardware store for another day of serving the community's practical needs. This was his world, bounded by familiar streets and sustained by the relationships he built over years of honest work and quiet presence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was good a place where a man could raise his son with dignity and purpose, where the value of character mattered more than the size of a bank account. The iron gates of the Hillcrest estate stood open, revealing a winding driveway that curved through mature oak trees toward the mansion itself. Jack had always admired the property from the road, but seeing it up close reminded him of the gap between his own modest circumstances and the kind of wealth that could acquire such a place on a whim. He parked his truck near the detached garage, a 3-car structure that had been built to match the mansion's Victorian architecture. The garage doors were painted forest green, with brass hardware that gleamed despite the early morning dew. Jack gathered his tools and approached the side entrance where he'd been told the problematic light fixture was located. Maya Sterling answered the door before he could knock, as if she'd been watching for his arrival. She was younger than he'd expected, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore jeans and a cable-knit sweater, clothing that suggested comfort rather than display, though Jack suspected even her casual clothes cost more than he typically spent on a month's worth of groceries. "Mr. Mason? I'm Maya Sterling. Thank you for coming out so early." Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. Jack found himself relaxing slightly, though he maintained the professional distance he'd learned to keep with clients who lived in different worlds. "No problem, Miss Sterling. I understand you're having some trouble with a garage light?" "That's right. I've been trying to figure it out myself, but I'm afraid I'm more comfortable with computer code than electrical work." She gestured toward the garage entrance, where a standard outdoor fixture hung dark and unresponsive. "A switch doesn't seem to do anything, and I checked the bulb twice." Jack set down his toolbox and examined the fixture, noting the way the mounting hardware had aged and the slight corrosion around the electrical connections. "Looks like it might be a wiring issue. These old fixtures sometimes develop problems where the wire connections meet the switch. Mind if I take a look?" "Please, go ahead. I suppose I'll watch and try to learn something." There was something refreshing about her honesty, the way she admitted ignorance without embarrassment. Jack positioned his stepladder beneath the fixture and began the methodical process of diagnosis, testing connections and tracing the electrical path from switch to light. As he worked, Maya Sterling asked questions, not the impatient demands of someone who wanted quick results, but the curious inquiries of someone genuinely interested in understanding how things worked. "So the electricity flows from the switch through these wires to the fixture itself?" "That's right. When you flip the switch, you're completing a circuit that allows the current to flow. If there's a break anywhere in that circuit, a loose connection, a corroded wire, a blown fuse, the light won't work." Jack's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking each connection point and testing the continuity of the circuit. The problem revealed itself gradually. Decades of moisture and temperature changes had corroded the wire connections inside the fixture, creating an intermittent break in the electrical flow. "There's your culprit," he said, showing Maya the corroded wires. "I'll need to clean these connections and probably replace some of the hardware to make sure it stays fixed." "How long will that take?" "About an hour, maybe less. I've got everything I need in the truck." Maya nodded, then surprised him by asking, "Would you mind if I helped? I mean, if there's something useful I can do? I'm trying to learn more about maintaining this place myself." Jack hesitated, unused to clients who wanted to participate in the repair process. Most preferred to disappear until the work was finished, returning only to inspect the results and write a check. But Maya Sterling seemed different, genuinely interested in understanding rather than simply purchasing a solution. "Sure, if you want. You can hand me tools and help hold things steady while I work." What followed was an hour of careful collaboration, Maya proving to be an attentive student who asked thoughtful questions and followed instructions with precision. She held the fixture steady while Jack cleaned the corroded connections, passed him the right tools without being asked twice, and listened intently as he explained the principles behind the repair. "You know," she said as Jack tested the completed work, "I've hired a lot of contractors over the years, but I've never had one take the time to actually teach me what they were doing." "Well, you never asked to learn before," Jack replied, then realized how presumptuous that sounded. "I mean, most people just want the problem fixed. Most people aren't trying to figure out how to live in a house this old without calling for help every time something goes wrong." Maya smiled, an expression that transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "I have a feeling I'm going to need to learn a lot more than just electrical work." Jack flipped the switch, and the garage light blazed to life, steady and bright. Maya clapped her hands together, delighted by the simple success in a way that made Jack smile despite himself. "There you go. That should give you years of reliable service." As Jack packed up his tools, Maya Sterling walked into his truck, asking about local contractors and reliable suppliers for household maintenance needs. She was planning to winterize the property herself, she explained, and wanted to understand what that would involve. "The hardware store on Main Street can get you most of what you'll need," Jack said, loading his toolbox into the truck bed. "Pete Kowalski's been running it for 20 years. He knows what works in this climate. And if I run into problems I can't handle myself?" Jack handed her his business card, a simple white rectangle with his name and phone number. "Feel free to call. I do all kinds of repair work, and I don't mind explaining what I'm doing." Maya studied the card, then looked up at Jack with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You know, Mr. Mason, you're really not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone less patient, I suppose? Less willing to teach?" She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "You're handsome, you know that?" The comment caught Jack completely off guard. He felt heat rise in his cheeks, a reaction he hadn't experienced in years. Maya Sterling was looking at him with frank appreciation, not the calculated interest of someone playing a game, but the honest assessment of a woman who'd noticed something worth noticing. Thank you," he managed, feeling foolish for his awkwardness. Maya's own cheeks reddened slightly, as if she was surprised by her own boldness. "I'm sorry, I don't usually just blurt things out like that. It's okay. It's been a while since anyone said anything like that to." They stood in comfortable awkwardness for a moment, two people who'd shared an unexpected moment of honesty. Jack found himself noticing details he'd missed before. The way Maya's hair caught the sunlight, the genuine warmth in her eyes, the graceful way she moved despite her obvious unfamiliarity with manual work. "Well," he said finally, "I should let you get back to your day. Of course. Thank you again for the lesson as much as the repair." Jack climbed into his truck, conscious of Maya Sterling watching him from the garage entrance. As he drove away, he found himself thinking about her comment, about the way she'd looked at him with something approaching admiration. It had been 3 years since Sarah's death, 3 years of focusing entirely on Tyler and work and the daily business of survival. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as something other than a father and a handyman. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks and familiar faces, but Jack found his thoughts returning to the woman at Hillcrest Mansion. Something about Maya Sterling had sparked a curiosity he hadn't felt in years, a sense that beneath her wealth and sophistication lay someone genuinely worth knowing. The feeling was both exciting and terrifying, a reminder that his heart had not completely closed itself off to possibility. As he picked up Tyler from school that afternoon, Jack wondered if he'd hear from Maya Sterling again, and found himself hoping the answer would be yes. 3 days after fixing the garage light, Jack's phone rang during Tyler's bedtime story. He let it go to voicemail, unwilling to interrupt their nightly ritual of reading about distant galaxies and brave astronauts. But when he checked the message, later, Maya Sterling's voice filled the quiet kitchen. "Hi, Mr. Mason. It's Maya Sterling from Hillcrest. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having another issue. The kitchen faucet is making this terrible grinding noise, and now it's barely trickling water. If you have time tomorrow, I'd really appreciate your help. I tried watching some online tutorials, but honestly, I'm afraid I'll make it worse." Jack stared at his phone after the message ended, twisting the gold band on his ring finger, a habit he'd developed whenever thoughts of moving forward felt like betrayal. Sarah's wedding ring had never left his hand in the 3 years since. Her funeral. It was his anchor to the life they'd built together, his promise that some things remained constant, even when everything else changed. The next morning, Tyler peppered him with questions during breakfast about the space lady, as he'd started calling Maya after Jack mentioned her interest in learning about the house's systems. "Is she really from outer space, Dad?" "No, buddy. She's from New York City, which sometimes feels almost as far away." Jack smiled, ruffling Tyler's hair. "She just bought the big house on the hill. Remember when we drove past it last week? The one that looks like a castle? Wow." Tyler's eyes widened with the wonder of a 9-year-old who still believed in fairy tales. "Does she have servants and everything?" "I don't think so. She seems to want to take care of things herself." The drive to Hillcrest felt different this time, charged with an anticipation Jack didn't want to examine too closely. Maya answered the door, wearing paint-splattered jeans and an old Columbia University sweatshirt, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked younger somehow, more approachable than the composed woman he'd met 3 days earlier. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said, leading him toward the kitchen. "I think I may have broken something when I tried to tighten the faucet handle yesterday." The kitchen was a showpiece of restored Victorian elegance, with marble countertops and custom cabinetry that probably cost more than Jack made in a year. But Maya had clearly been living in it, not just admiring at coffee mugs in the sink, a laptop open on the breakfast bar, takeout containers suggesting she hadn't quite mastered cooking in her new environment. "Let me take a look." Jack knelt beside the sink, examining the faucet assembly. "You're right. There's definitely something wrong with the cartridge. Probably happened when you tried to tighten it. These old fixtures can be tricky. I should have called you first instead of trying to fix it myself." Maya perched on a bar stool, watching as Jack began disassembling the faucet. "My assistant back in the city used to handle all this stuff. I never realized how much I depended on other people to keep my life running smoothly." "Nothing wrong with learning," Jack said, testing the water pressure. "Most people never get the chance to understand how their own houses work." "Is that how you learned? From your father?" Jack paused, surprised by the personal question. Most clients kept conversations. Strictly business. "My grandfather, actually. He was the town handyman before my dad took over. Said every man should know how to fix what breaks around him." "And your father taught you?" "Eventually." Jack's voice carried decades of complicated emotions. "He wasn't much for patience when I was young. Had to learn most of it through trial and error after he passed." Maya was quiet for a moment, sensing the deeper currents beneath his words. "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult. Water under the bridge." Jack focused on the faucet repair, uncomfortable with the sympathy in her voice. He wasn't used to clients who asked personal questions or seemed genuinely interested in his answers. As he worked, Maya continued asking questions about the repair process, but also about Cedar Falls, about Tyler, about the rhythms of small-town life. Her curiosity felt genuine, not the idle interest of someone making conversation to pass time. "Tyler's teacher says he's exceptional in science," Jack found himself saying as he replaced the damaged cartridge. "Wants to be an astronaut when he grows up. That's wonderful. The world needs more people who dream big. Maya's smile was warm, without a trace of condescension. What does his mother think about his space obsession? The question hit Jack like a physical blow, unexpected and sharp. He'd grown adept at deflecting such inquiries, at changing the subject before emotions could surface. But something about Maya's gentle tone, her obvious care in asking, made deflection feel dishonest. His mother passed away 3 years ago, Jack said quietly, not looking up from his work. Cancer. She would have loved his interest in space. She was always encouraging him to reach for the stars. Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. The use of his first name, the genuine distress in her voice, created an intimacy Jack hadn't expected. He glanced up to find Maya watching him with compassion that felt both comforting and dangerous. It's okay. You couldn't have known. He turned the water on, testing the repaired faucet. We're doing fine, Tyler and me. Taking it one day at a time. That must be incredibly difficult, raising a child alone while building a business. Jack twisted his wedding ring, a familiar gesture providing its usual comfort. Sarah always said, I was stubborn enough to handle anything life threw at me. Guess we're finding out if she was right. Maya was quiet for several minutes, watching Jack clean up his tools with methodical precision. When she spoke again, her voice carried a vulnerability he hadn't heard before. I lost my parents when I was 15, she said. Car accident. I know it's not the same as losing a spouse, but I understand something about rebuilding your life after the world falls apart. Jack looked up, seeing Maya Sterling clearly for the first time. Beneath the wealth and success, she was someone who understood loss, who had faced the kind of pain that changes everything. The realization shifted something fundamental in how he saw her. I'm sorry. That's young to lose your parents. My grandmother raised me after that. She's the one who taught me that survival isn't enough. You have to find ways to thrive, to honor the people you've lost by living fully. Maya's eyes met his. But it's scary, isn't it? Opening yourself up to caring about new people when you know how much it can hurt to lose them. The honesty in her words cut through Jack's carefully maintained defenses. This wasn't small talk or polite conversation. This was one wounded person recognizing another, offering the kind of understanding that could only come from shared experience. Tyler helps, Jack said finally. Having someone who needs you makes it easier to keep going. He's lucky to have you. From what I can tell, you're doing an amazing job with him. Some days I feel like I'm just making it up as I go along. Isn't that what all parents do? Maya smiled, and Jack found himself smiling back, feeling lighter than he had in months. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the kitchen filled with the quiet sounds of late morning birds outside the windows, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Jack felt the urge to stay longer, to continue this conversation. It felt more honest than any he'd had in years. The faucet should work perfectly now, he said instead, gathering his tools. But if you have any other issues, don't hesitate to call. Actually, Maya said, following him toward the door, I was wondering if you might be interested in a bigger project. I've been thinking about winterizing the house myself, but I have no idea where to start. Would you consider showing me what needs to be done? I'd pay your usual rate, of course, plus extra for the teaching time. Jack paused at the door, considering the offer. Working closely with Maya Sterling over several days would mean more conversations like this one, more moments of unexpected connection. The prospect was both appealing and terrifying. That's a big job for someone who's never done it before, he said carefully. I'm a fast learner, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I just need someone patient enough to show me the ropes. Maya's eyes held a challenge and a plea in equal measure. Besides, if I'm going to live here, I should understand how to take care of the place. You're planning to stay? Not just use it as a weekend retreat? I'm thinking about it. The city has been feeling less like home lately, and this place She gestured toward the windows, overlooking the rolling hills. "There's something peaceful about it here, something real." Jack found himself nodding before he'd fully considered the implications. "All right. I can show you what needs to be done, but it'll take several days, and some of the work is physically demanding. I can handle it." Maya's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face. "When can we start? Tomorrow morning? I usually drop Tyler at school around 8, so I could be here by 8:30. Perfect. Should I pick up any supplies beforehand? I'll make a list and drop it by tonight after I pick up Tyler. That way, you can look everything over and ask questions before we start." As Jack drove away from Hillcrest, he caught himself looking forward to the evening's return visit with an anticipation that felt both foreign and familiar. Maya Sterling was drawing him into something he'd sworn off after Sarah's death, the possibility of genuine connection with another person. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, it felt like the first warm day after a long, cold winter. That evening, Tyler chatted excitedly about his day, while Jack prepared a simple dinner of grilled cheese and tomato soup. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, his stories about school friends and playground adventures filling the kitchen with laughter. But underneath Jack's attention to his son's narrative, part of his mind was already planning the next day's work at Hillcrest, anticipating the hours he'd spend teaching Maya Sterling the practical arts of home maintenance. After Tyler was asleep, Jack sat at the kitchen table, making a detailed list of supplies needed for winterizing an old house. He found himself adding explanatory notes beside each item, wanting Maya to understand not just what to buy, but why each element was necessary. The list grew longer than usual, more comprehensive than he'd typically provide for a client. As he prepared to drive back to Hillcrest, Jack caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back at him seemed different, somehow more alert, more alive than he'd appeared in months. The wedding ring on his finger caught the light, a reminder of promises made and a life that had ended too soon. But for the first time since Sarah's death, those promises felt less like chains and more like a foundation on which something new might eventually be built. The drive to Hillcrest took him through the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, past houses where neighbors were settling in for the evening. This was his world, bounded by familiar streets and sustained by relationships built over years of steady presence. But Maya Sterling represented something different, a window into possibilities he'd forgotten existed, a reminder that life contained more than just survival and responsibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to connect with someone who seemed to see him as more than just a handyman with a truck full of tools. The prospect was exciting and terrifying in equal measure, a step toward a future he wasn't sure he was ready to embrace, but found himself unable to resist. Maya answered the door the next morning, wearing brand new work boots that still bore their price tags, designer jeans that had never seen actual work, and a determined expression that made Jack smile despite himself. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she held a steaming mug of coffee like armor against the crisp October air. "I may have gone a little overboard at the hardware store," she admitted, leading him toward the garage where neat stacks of supplies were arranged. With military precision, Pete Kowalski was very thorough in explaining why I needed 3 different types of caulk. Jack examined her purchases, impressed by the quality and completeness of what she'd assembled. "Pete steered you right. This is professional-grade stuff, better than what most weekend warriors would choose. I figured if I'm going to learn to do this properly, I might as well use proper tools." Maya kicked at her pristine work boots. "Though I suspect these are going to look very different by the end of the week." The first lesson involved weather stripping the windows, a task that required patience more than skill. Jack demonstrated the technique on one window, explaining how to measure accurately, cut cleanly, and install the strips without gaps that would let cold air through. Maya watched intently asking questions about thermal efficiency and energy loss that surprised him with their sophistication. "You're thinking like an engineer," he observed as she practiced on her second window. "Most people just want to know where to stick the strips." Old habits. In my business, understanding systems is everything. A house is just another kind of system, right? Input, output, efficiency optimization. Jack watched her work, noting the way she approached each task methodically, checking her measurements twice, and adjusting her technique based on his feedback. Her movements were careful but confident, lacking the hesitation he'd expected from someone entirely new to manual work. "What exactly do you do in the tech world?" he asked, holding a window frame steady while she installed the bottom strip. "Data, architecture, mostly. I help companies organize their information systems so they can make better decisions." Maya paused in her work, looking thoughtful. "It's all about finding patterns in chaos, creating structures that make complex things simple." Sounds complicated. It is, but it's also satisfying when you get it right. Kind of like this, actually. She gestured toward the window they'd just completed, taking something that doesn't work properly and making it better. They worked in comfortable rhythm, moving from window to window around the mansion's first floor. Maya proved to be an apt student, quick to understand concepts and careful in execution. But more than her competence, Jack found himself drawn to her curiosity about the process, the way she wanted to understand, not just what to do, but why each step mattered. "Tell me about Tyler," she said, as they took a break for lunch on the front porch. "What's he like when he's not dreaming about space travel?" Jack leaned against the porch railing, considering how to capture his son's essence for someone who'd never met him. "He's got his mother's heart," he said finally. "Always thinking about other people, always trying to make things better. Sometimes I worry he carries too much responsibility for a 9-year-old. Responsibility how? He worries about me. About whether I'm eating enough, whether I'm getting enough sleep. Sarah used to joke that Tyler was born middle-aged, always looking out for everyone else." Jack's voice softened with memory. "After she died, he appointed himself my caretaker. Brings me aspirin when I have a headache. Makes sure I remember to eat lunch." Maya was quiet for a moment, processing this glimpse into their family dynamic. That must be both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Pretty much sums it up. Jack took a long drink of water, feeling the October sun warm his face. "I keep telling him it's okay to just be a kid, but I think he sees taking care of me as taking care of her memory too. Smart boy. Sounds like he understands love better than most adults." The comment hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to explore. Jack found himself studying Maya's profile as she gazed out over the mansion's grounds, noting the way sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, the graceful line of her neck above the collar of her work shirt. "What about you?" he asked. "Any family besides the grandmother who raised you?" "She passed away 2 years ago. 93 and sharp as a tack until the very end." Maya's smile was bittersweet. "She would have loved this place. She always said the best homes were the ones that demanded you earn their respect." Sounds like a wise woman. She was. Taught me that money couldn't buy character, but character could eventually buy you anything worth having. Maya turned to look at Jack directly. "I think she would have liked you." The compliment hit him unexpectedly, creating a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Jack found himself returning Maya's gaze, noting the intelligence in her dark eyes, the genuine interest in her expression. For a moment, the professional distance between client and contractor dissolved entirely. "We should probably get back to work," he said, stepping away from the intensity of the moment. "Of course, these windows won't weather strip themselves." The afternoon passed quickly, filled with steady work and easy conversation. Maya proved increasingly capable as she gained confidence, requiring less guidance and demonstrating natural problem-solving instincts. By late afternoon, they'd completed the first floor windows and made significant progress on caulking the exterior trim. "I can't believe how satisfying this is," Maya said, stepping back to admire their completed work. "I've spent years managing abstract systems, but there's something incredible about fixing something you can actually touch. Wait until you see your heating bills this winter. Then you'll really appreciate the work. About that, would you be willing to check out the furnace system? I have no idea if it's ready for cold weather, and I'd rather not learn the hard way that something's wrong." Jack nodded, following Maya to the basement, where an impressive array of mechanical systems hummed quietly in the dim light. The furnace was a modern high-efficiency unit, probably installed when the previous owner renovated the house, but the ductwork showed signs of age and needed attention. "Good news is the furnace looks well maintained," Jack said, examining the unit's diagnostic panel. "Bad news is you've got some ductwork issues that should be addressed before you really need the heat." "Expensive issues?" "Depends on how much of the work you want to tackle yourself. The actual repairs aren't complicated, but they're time-consuming and dirty." Maya grinned, holding up her now filthy work boots. "I think I'm getting used to dirty. What would I need to learn?" Over the next hour, Jack walked Maya through the basics of ductwork maintenance, explaining how to identify problem areas and prioritize repairs. She took notes on her phone, asked detailed questions, and demonstrated the same methodical approach to learning that had impressed him during the window work. "This is going to sound presumptuous," Maya said as they prepared to call it a day, "but would you and Tyler like to have dinner here tomorrow night? I could pick up something from town, and Tyler could see the library. I remember you mentioning his love of books." Jack hesitated, sensing the invitation crossed an invisible line between professional and personal relationships. But the genuine warmth in Maya's voice, combined with his son's likely excitement at seeing a real library, made refusal seem churlish. "Tyler would love that." "But you don't need to go to any trouble." "It's no trouble at all. Besides," Maya's smile turned slightly mischievous, "I could use the help figuring out how to use that enormous kitchen properly." As Jack packed up his tools, he found himself looking forward to the following evening with an anticipation that felt both foreign and familiar. Maya Sterling was proving to be far more than the wealthy weekend warrior he'd initially expected. She was intelligent, curious, and surprisingly down-to-earth, despite her obvious sophistication. The drive home took him through the center of Cedar Falls, where evening shoppers were emerging from businesses along Main Street. Jack waved to several familiar faces, noting how normal everything appeared, despite the fundamental shift he felt in his own perspective. Tomorrow, he would bring his son to dinner at the mansion on the hill, introducing Tyler to a woman who was becoming increasingly important in ways Jack wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. That evening, Tyler's excitement about visiting the space lady filled their small house with energy Jack hadn't experienced in months. The boy peppered him with questions about Maya, about the mansion, about whether they'd be eating in a formal dining room like people in movies. "She seems really nice, Dad," Tyler said as Jack tucked him into bed. "And she's helping you learn. About space stuff, right?" "She's learning about house stuff from me, buddy, not the other way around. But she knows about computers and smart things. Maybe she knows about space computers, too." Tyler's eyes shone with possibility. "Do you think she's pretty?" The question caught Jack off guard, coming from his 9-year-old son with innocent directness. Yes, Tyler, she's pretty. But that's not why we're helping her with the house." "I know that, Dad. You're helping her because you're good at fixing things." Tyler paused, considering his next words carefully. "But it's okay if you think she's pretty, too. Mom would want you to notice pretty things." The wisdom in his son's words created a tightness in Jack's throat. Tyler was offering permission Jack hadn't realized he needed, absolution for feelings he'd been afraid to acknowledge. The boy's understanding of love and loss, despite his young age, demonstrated a maturity that was both impressive and heartbreaking. Get some sleep, astronaut. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. As Jack turned off Tyler's bedroom light, he caught a glimpse of himself in the hallway mirror. The man reflected there looked different than he had just a week ago, more alert, more present, more alive. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. The first visible sign that his carefully controlled world was beginning to expand beyond the boundaries of mere survival. The wedding ring on his finger caught the light as he prepared for bed. It's familiar. Wait, a reminder of promises made and love shared. But for the first time since Sarah's death, those promises felt less like barriers and more like foundations, solid ground on which something new and different might eventually be built. Tyler's eyes went wide the moment he stepped through the front door of Hillcrest Mansion, his small hand gripping Jack's as he took in the soaring ceilings and elegant staircase. Maya greeted them with flour dusting her hands and an apologetic smile. "I may have been overly ambitious attempting homemade pizza," she confessed, leading them toward the kitchen, with a sense of tomato sauce and melted cheese filled the air. "But Tyler, I have something I think you're going to love." She guided them through the main hall to a room Jack hadn't seen before, a library that stretched 2 stories high, with rolling ladders and thousands of books lining the walls. Tyler released his father's hand and stepped into the room as if entering a cathedral, his mouth slightly open in wonder. "Are all these books yours?" he whispered, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of knowledge surrounding him. "They came with the house," Maya said gently. "The previous owner was a professor who collected books his entire life. But I was hoping you might help me figure out which ones are about space and astronomy. I'd love to learn more about what interests you." Tyler nodded solemnly, accepting this mission with the seriousness of a 9-year-old who understood the importance of books. He began examining the shelves methodically, occasionally pulling out volumes and showing them to Maya with excited explanations about planets, rockets, and the International Space Station. Jack watched his son's enthusiasm with a mixture of pride and concern. Tyler was clearly enchanted by both the library and its owner, chattering away with Maya as if he'd known her for years. The easy rapport between them was beautiful to witness, but it also highlighted how rarely Tyler had opportunities to share his passions with someone new. "He doesn't usually warm up to people this quickly," Jack murmured to Maya as Tyler disappeared behind a tall bookshelf, hunting for more astronomy texts. "Maybe he's just excited to find someone who's interested in learning about the things he loves," Maya replied. "It must be hard being the only space enthusiast in a small town." Before Jack could respond, Tyler emerged from behind the bookshelf, carrying a massive hardcover volume, struggling slightly under its weight. "Look at this. One, it's got pictures of all the different types of galaxies, and charts showing how far away they are from Earth." Maya helped him carry the book to a reading table, where Tyler immediately began flipping through pages, his excitement infectious as he pointed out nebulae and star clusters. Jack found himself drawn into his son's explanations, seeing familiar constellations through Tyler's eyes, while Maya asked thoughtful questions that encouraged the boy to elaborate on his knowledge. "Did you know that light from some stars takes so long to reach us that we're actually seeing them as they were millions of years ago?" Tyler said, his voice filled with the wonder of someone who truly grasped the magnitude of what he was describing. "That's incredible," Maya said, and Jack could tell her fascination was genuine rather than polite. "So when we look at the night sky, we're actually looking backward in time?" "Exactly." "Dad, can we show Maya the constellation charts from my room sometime? I bet she'd like to see how they change with the seasons." The casual way Tyler included Maya in their future plans created a flutter of anxiety in Jack's chest. His son was already building connections, making assumptions about Maya's continued presence in their lives. The innocent request highlighted how carefully Jack would need to navigate this developing relationship. "We'll see, buddy. Maya's probably pretty busy with work and getting settled here. Actually, Maya said, meeting Jack's eyes over Tyler's head, I'd love to see your constellation charts. Maybe we could do some stargazing from the mansion's back porch. The views are incredible from up here. Tyler's excitement was immediate and overwhelming. Really? You'd want to look at stars with us? Dad, she wants to look at stars. Jack felt something shift in his chest, a combination of warmth and terror as he watched his son's joy. Tyler had been cautious about forming new attachments since Sarah's death, but Maya seemed to be breaking through those careful defenses with her genuine interest and patient attention. The timer in the kitchen interrupted the moment, and Maya excused herself to check on dinner. Jack used the opportunity to crouch down to Tyler's eye level, needing to manage his son's expectations before they ran too far ahead of reality. Tyler, I need you to remember that Maya is still figuring out whether she wants to stay in Cedar Falls permanently. She might decide to go back to the city, and if she does, that's okay. We can't count on her always being here. Tyler's face grew serious, the adult understanding that lurked beneath his 9-year-old enthusiasm surfacing briefly. I know, Dad, but she seems different from the other city people who come here. She really listens when I talk about space stuff. I know she does, buddy. Just let's take things one day at a time, okay? Tyler nodded, but Jack could see the boy was already invested in whatever this relationship might become. The realization created a weight of responsibility Jack hadn't anticipated. He wasn't just protecting his own heart anymore, but Tyler's as well. Maya called them to dinner, where she'd managed to create surprisingly good homemade pizza, despite her earlier concerns. The kitchen table, which could have seated 8 people comfortably, felt intimate with just the 3 of them gathered at one end. Tyler regaled Maya with stories about school, his friends, and his latest space-related projects, while Maya shared tales of her early struggles with technology and the satisfaction of building something from nothing. I started my company in my grandmother's garage, she told Tyler. Just me, a laptop, and a lot of determination. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me that the best solutions usually come from understanding problems really deeply, like how Dad fixes things by figuring out what's really wrong instead of just what seems broken, Tyler said, beaming at his father with obvious pride. Jack felt heat rise in his cheeks at his son's admiration, but Maya was nodding thoughtfully. Exactly like that. Your dad has a gift for seeing the real problem underneath the obvious symptoms. That's a rare skill. The compliment caught Jack off guard, delivered with sincerity that made it impossible to dismiss as mere politeness. Maya had been watching him work, really watching, and had come to appreciate something about his approach that most clients never noticed. After dinner, Tyler convinced Maya to show them the mansion's other rooms, conducting an impromptu tour that revealed his natural curiosity about how things worked. He peppered Maya with questions about the house's history, its architectural features, and her plans for renovation. Maya answered patiently, clearly enjoying Tyler's enthusiasm, while occasionally looking to Jack for clarification about structural or mechanical aspects. The previous owner told me this house has 17 rooms, Maya said as they climbed the main staircase. I'm still discovering some of them myself. 17 rooms? Tyler's eyes were wide. Our house has 5 rooms, and sometimes it feels like too many to keep clean. Maya laughed, a genuine sound that filled the high-ceilinged hallway. I'm beginning to understand why the previous owner hired so much help. Maintaining a place like this is going to be a full-time education. That's why you have Dad, Tyler said matter-of-factly. He can fix anything and teach you how to do it yourself, too. The simple confidence in Tyler's voice created another flutter in Jack's chest. His son clearly saw Maya as a permanent addition to their world, someone who would naturally turn to Jack for guidance and support. The assumption was both touching and concerning, evidence of how quickly Tyler had embraced the possibility of expanding their small family unit. As they made their way back downstairs, Tyler grew quieter, the excitement of the evening giving way to the drowsiness that followed a big day. Maya noticed his fatigue and suggested they could continue exploring the house another time, a casual comment that again implied ongoing visits and developing relationships. "Thank you for dinner," Jack said as they prepared to leave. "Tyler's going to be talking about this library for weeks. Thank you for bringing him. It's been wonderful having someone appreciate all these books." They seemed lonely just sitting on the shelves. Maya knelt down to Tyler's level. "Would you like to borrow a few of those astronomy books? I think they'd enjoy being read again." Tyler's face lit up with surprise and delight. "Really? I can borrow them? As many as you want, whenever you want. Consider it our own private library exchange program." Tyler carefully selected 3 books from the collection they'd explored earlier, holding them like precious treasures as Maya wrapped them in a shopping bag for the drive home. The gesture was simple but profound, creating a tangible connection between Maya and Tyler that extended beyond this single evening. "Maya," Tyler said as they reached the front door, "would you like to come to my school's science fair next month? I'm doing a project about the solar system, and I think you'd understand the important parts." Jack felt his breath catch, recognizing this invitation as Tyler's highest honor and inclusion in the aspects of his life that mattered most. Maya seemed to understand the significance as well, her expression growing serious as she considered her response. "I would be honored to see your project, Tyler. When is the science fair?" "November 15th. Dad always comes, but it would be really cool if you came too. I'll mark my calendar right now." Maya pulled out her phone and made a visible note, showing Tyler the entry. "Will you tell me more about your solar system project next time I see you?" Tyler nodded enthusiastically, and Jack realized that next time had become an assumption for all of them. Maya Sterling was no longer just a client or even a friend. She was becoming woven into the fabric of their lives in ways that felt both natural and terrifying. The drive home was filled with Tyler's chatter about the evening, his excitement about the borrowed books, and his plans for showing Maya his constellation charts. Jack listened with half his attention, while the other half processed the evening's significance. Tyler had accepted Maya completely, with the open-hearted trust that children reserve for people who genuinely see and value them. But more concerning was Jack's own response to watching Maya with his son. Seeing her patient attention to Tyler's interests, her genuine enjoyment of his enthusiasm, had stirred feelings Jack thought he'd buried with Sarah. Maya wasn't just attractive and intelligent. She was kind, thoughtful, and naturally nurturing in ways that made Jack's carefully constructed walls feel increasingly inadequate. That night, after Tyler had fallen asleep with one of Maya's astronomy books open beside him, Jack sat on his front porch in the October darkness, thinking about the evening and its implications. The wedding ring on his finger felt heavier than usual, its familiar weight a reminder of promises made and love lost. But for the first time since Sarah's death, those promises felt less like barriers and more like a foundation, solid ground on which something new and precious might eventually be built. The playground equipment at Cedar Falls Elementary sat, rusted and neglected in the corner of the schoolyard, its broken swings and wobbly slide a testament to the community's limited resources. Jack had noticed its deteriorating condition countless times while dropping Tyler off at school, filing it away as another problem that would have to wait for better financial times. But as he drifted off to sleep that night, Jack found himself wondering what Maya might think of the playground's condition and whether her obvious care for Tyler extended to other children in their small community. The thought was both hopeful and dangerous, another step toward seeing Maya Sterling not as a temporary presence in their lives, but as someone who might stay long enough to matter in all the ways that counted. The morning Jack slipped Sarah's wedding ring into his dresser drawer. His hands trembled with the weight of what the gesture meant. 3 years and 2 months of wearing it every day, of twisting it during difficult moments, of drawing comfort from its familiar presence. But watching Maya read astronomy books to Tyler in the mansion's library the previous evening had crystallized something he'd been avoiding. His heart was opening again, whether he wanted it to or not. Tyler noticed the missing ring immediately. At breakfast, his observant eyes catching the pale band of skin where gold had rested for so long. "Where's your wedding ring, Dad?" The question was asked with 9-year-old directness, without judgment, but with clear curiosity. Jack paused in spreading peanut butter on Tyler's sandwich, choosing his words carefully. "I put it somewhere safe. It'll always be important to me, but maybe it's time to let my hand feel different." Tyler considered this with the seriousness he brought to all matters concerning his parents. "Does that mean you might like Maya the way you liked Mom?" The question hit Jack with surprising force, not because it was unexpected, but because it came from someone who understood love in its purest form. Tyler had been watching, processing, drawing conclusions with the clarity that children bring to emotional truths adults complicate. "Maybe, buddy. Is that okay with you?" Tyler's face broke into a smile that seemed to light up the entire kitchen. "I think Mom would like Maya. They both ask good questions and make you laugh when you don't." Expected, Jack felt something ease in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Tyler's approval wasn't necessary for him to move forward, but having it felt like a blessing he hadn't dared hope for the drive to Hillcrest. That morning took Jack through the center of town, where the approaching weekend brought its usual rhythm of preparation and anticipation. He waved to familiar faces, noting how normal everything appeared despite the fundamental changes occurring in his own life. At Murphy's Diner, the morning coffee crowd was already gathered, and Jack knew that by evening, news of his work at the mansion would be thoroughly discussed and analyzed. Maya met him at the door wearing work clothes that actually looked lived in. Her expensive boots now properly scuffed, and her jeans bearing honest stains from their previous repair sessions. She seemed more relaxed, more settled in her own skin, as if the physical work of maintaining the house was teaching her something important about herself. "I have a confession," she said, leading him toward the kitchen. "I may have gotten a little carried away with research last night. I spent 3 hours reading about playground safety standards and modern equipment design." Jack paused in unpacking his tools, recognizing the slightly manic energy that accompanied Maya's deep dives into new subjects. Playground research? I keep thinking about what Tyler said about the school playground, about how some of the equipment is broken and the kids can't use it safely. Maya pulled out her laptop, which was surrounded by printed articles and handwritten notes. "Did you know that proper playground design can improve children's physical development, social skills, and even academic performance?" I had no idea you were interested in child development. I wasn't, until I started thinking about Tyler and his friends having to play on broken equipment while their school struggles with budget constraints. Maya's eyes were bright with the enthusiasm Jack was learning to recognize when she'd found a problem worth solving. What would it cost to completely renovate the playground? To bring it up to modern safety standards and add equipment that would actually engage kids' imaginations? Jack set down his coffee cup, studying Maya's face to determine how serious she was about this line of inquiry. "Are we talking about a donation to the school, or are you planning to take on playground construction as your next learning project?" "Both, actually. I want to fund it, but I also want to understand how it gets built. I want to be involved in choosing equipment that will really benefit the children, not just write a check and walk away." The passion in her voice reminded Jack of the way she'd approached learning about house maintenance, not as a casual hobby, but as something worth mastering completely. Maya Sterling didn't seem capable of half measures, and the playground project was apparently receiving her full attention. "That's a big undertaking," Jack said carefully. "The planning alone would take weeks, and then there's permitting, site, preparation, installation, which is why I need someone who understands construction projects and knows the community well enough to navigate local requirements." Maya's smile was both hopeful and determined. "Someone who could teach me what I need to know while making sure we do it right." Jack found himself nodding before he'd fully considered the implications. Working on a playground renovation would mean spending weeks in close collaboration with Maya, planning and building something that would benefit Tyler and every other child in Cedar Falls. The project would make them partners in a very public way, cementing their relationship in the community's perception. The school board would need to approve any major changes, he said, already thinking through the practical steps. And there are liability issues, safety inspections, probably a dozen permits we'd need to secure. So you'll help me figure it out? Tyler would never forgive me if I didn't. Jack smiled, feeling excitement build despite his reservations. But we should probably finish winterizing your house before we take on playground construction. About that, I've been doing some of the simpler tasks on my own. Maya gestured toward the windows they'd worked on previously, where she'd clearly continued the weather stripping project independently. I may have become slightly obsessed with thermal efficiency. Jack examined her work, impressed by the neat installation and attention to detail. Maya had not only absorbed his lessons, but had developed her own system for ensuring consistent results. The transformation from helpless city dweller to competent homeowner was happening faster than he'd expected. This is excellent work. You've definitely gotten the hang of it. It's incredibly satisfying. I never realized how much I was missing by having other people handle all the practical aspects of maintaining a living space. Maya ran her hand along a perfectly installed weather strip. Every time I fix something myself, the house feels more like it actually belongs to me. They spent the morning working on the mansion's heating system, with Maya proving increasingly capable of handling complex repairs under Jack's guidance. Her questions had evolved from basic understanding to sophisticated problem-solving, and she demonstrated the kind of mechanical intuition that usually took years to develop. You're a natural at this, Jack observed as Maya successfully diagnosed a ductwork issue he'd been planning to handle himself. Have you considered that you might have missed your calling as a contractor? Funny, you should say that. I've been thinking about scaling back my involvement in the company, maybe transitioning to more of an advisory role. Maya's voice carried a wistfulness Jack hadn't heard before. The work that used to challenge me feels less important now, less connected to anything that really matters. What would you do instead? I don't know yet, but I'm starting to understand why people choose to live in places like Cedar Falls, why they value community and connection over professional achievement. Maya met his eyes, her expression serious. This place is changing how I think about what success actually looks like. The honesty in her words created an intimacy that felt both natural and dangerous. Jack found himself wanting to encourage her exploration of this new direction, while simultaneously fearing what it might mean for his own carefully ordered life. Maya Sterling was not just learning to fix houses. She was reconsidering fundamental assumptions about what kind of life she wanted to live. That afternoon, they drove to the elementary school to measure the playground area and assess the existing equipment. Maya walked the space with the focused attention she brought to all her projects, taking notes and photos, while Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, explained the challenges the school faced with their current setup. The liability insurance alone costs us a fortune, Mrs. Patterson said, pointing to a swing set that had been cordoned off due to safety concerns. We've had to restrict access to half the equipment because we can't afford the repairs needed to bring it up to current safety standards. Maya asked detailed questions about enrollment numbers, age ranges, and the types of activities that would best serve the student population. Jack watched her work, recognizing the systematic approach she brought to understanding complex problems. By the time they left the school, Maya had filled a notebook with observations and was already sketching preliminary ideas for a comprehensive renovation. This is going to be amazing, she said as they drove back toward Hillcrest. Imagine what it would mean for the kids to have equipment designed specifically for their needs, space for both active play and quiet interaction, maybe even some educational elements integrated into the design. Jack found himself caught up in her enthusiasm, imagining Tyler's excitement when he learned about the project. The kids will love it, and it'll mean a lot to the parents to see someone care about improving things for their children. It's not just about the children, though. This is about becoming part of the community in a meaningful way, contributing something that will last long after I'm gone. Maya paused, seeming to realize the implications of her words. I mean, if I decide to stay permanently, which I'm seriously considering. The casual mention of permanency sent a jolt of hope and terror through Jack's chest. Maya Sterling was no longer talking about Cedar Falls as a temporary retreat. She was beginning to see it as home, as a place where she might build a life. The realization forced Jack to confront his own assumptions about their developing relationship and what he hoped it might become. That evening, Jack sat on his front porch, watching the sun set over Cedar Falls, his ring finger feeling strange and naked without its familiar weight. Tyler was inside finishing homework, occasionally calling out questions about his astronomy project. The sounds of their evening routine felt unchanged, but Jack knew something fundamental had shifted in their world. Maya Sterling was becoming part of their story, weaving herself into their lives with a naturalness that both thrilled and terrified him. The playground project would make their connection public, cementing their partnership in ways that would be difficult to undo if things went wrong. But watching Maya's genuine care for Tyler, her growing investment in the community, her obvious contentment with their simple life, Jack found himself believing that some risks were worth taking. The wedding ring in his dresser drawer would always represent the love he'd shared with Sarah, but it no longer needed to be a barrier to the love that might be possible with someone else. Tyler had given his blessing. The community was beginning to accept Maya as one of their own, and Jack's own heart was opening in ways he'd thought might never be possible again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build something meaningful together. For the first time in 3 years, Jack Mason was looking forward to an uncertain future with hope instead of fear. Jack's toolbox sat open on Maya's kitchen counter, its worn leather interior revealing decades of honest work. Each tool bore the patina of his father's hands and his grandfather's before him. Screwdrivers with wooden handles smooth from use, wrenches that had loosened thousands of stubborn bolts, measuring tools calibrated by experience rather than factory precision. This belonged to my grandfather originally, Jack said, lifting out a hand-forged hammer with a hickory handle. He made some of these tools himself, back when you couldn't just drive to the hardware store for everything you needed. Maya handled the hammer with reverence, feeling the weight and balance of an instrument shaped by decades of purposeful use. It's beautiful. You can feel the history in it. Grandpa always said a man's tools were a reflection of his character. Take care of them, and they'd take care of you for a lifetime. Jack selected a well-worn level, showing Maya how its brass fittings had been polished by countless hands. This level helped build half the houses in Cedar Falls, including the one where I'm raising Tyler. They were working on the mansion's front porch, replacing rotten floorboards that had succumbed to decades of weather and neglect. Maya had insisted on learning the entire process, from identifying structural damage to selecting appropriate lumber to executing repairs that would last another generation. Her questions had evolved from basic technique to understanding the philosophy behind quality craftsmanship. Why do you think your grandfather chose this particular type of wood for the handle? Maya asked, examining the hammer's construction with engineer-like attention to detail. Hickory's strong but flexible. Won't crack under stress the way harder woods might, but it's tough enough to deliver real force when you need it. Jack demonstrated the tool's balance, showing how its weight distribution made precise work possible. Good tools are about finding the right balance between different qualities, not maximizing any single attribute. Maya nodded thoughtfully, and Jack could see her applying this principle beyond carpentry, recognizing parallels to the system design, work that had built her fortune. She approached physical labor with the same analytical mind that had made her successful in technology. But she was learning to value different kinds of intelligence and skill. "Tell me about your father," Maya said as they worked side by side, replacing boards with methodical precision. "Did he teach you everything you know about construction?" Jack paused in his work, considering how to explain a relationship that had been complicated by expectations and disappointment. Dad was a good craftsman, but he wasn't much for teaching. Expected me to learn by watching and figuring things out on my own. That must have been frustrating, sometimes. But it also meant I had to really understand why things worked the way they did, not just memorize techniques. Jack fitted a new board into place, checking its alignment with practiced efficiency. Sarah used to joke that I learned patience from tools that wouldn't cooperate and persistence from projects that seemed impossible. The mention of his late wife created a moment of comfortable acknowledgement rather than awkward tension. Maya had become skilled at honoring Sarah's memory without letting it dominate their conversations, understanding that Jack's past was part of what made him who he was. "She sounds like she understood you very well." She did. Sarah could see potential in things other people had given up on. Broken furniture, struggling students, stubborn husbands who thought they had to handle everything alone. Jack's smile carried warmth and sadness in equal measure. She would have liked this project, seeing something neglected get the attention it deserves. Maya worked quietly for several minutes, processing the implications of Jack's words. "Is that what's happening here? With the house, I mean. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just learning that some things are worth the effort it takes to restore them properly." The double meaning in his words hung between them, acknowledged but not examined too closely. They had developed a rhythm of honest communication that danced around deeper emotions while still honoring the connection growing between them. Tyler's arrival after school transformed the afternoon's quiet productivity into something more lively and complex. The boy had taken to stopping by the mansion most days, treating it as an extension of his own home, where interesting projects and patient adults awaited his enthusiastic participation. "Maya, look what Mrs. Patterson gave me." Tyler burst through the front door carrying a large poster board covered with astronomical photographs. "She said I could use it for my science fair project, and she wants to know if you're really coming to see it." "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Maya said, examining Tyler's collection of space images with genuine interest. "These pictures are incredible. Where did Mrs. Patterson get them?" "She printed them from NASA's website. But she said if I want really good ones for my project, I might need access to better printing equipment." Tyler's voice carried the careful hope of a child testing the waters of a significant request. Jack recognized the tone. Immediately Tyler was building toward asking for something he wasn't sure he could have. Maya seemed to sense it too, giving Tyler her full attention as he explained his vision for a comprehensive solar system display. "I want to show the planets to scale, with information about what it would be like to visit each one. But the pictures need to be really clear for people to see the details that make each planet special." Tyler's excitement was infectious, his passion for his subject evident in every word. "What kind of printing equipment would you need?" Maya asked, her question carrying the practical focus Tyler had learned to expect from her. Mrs. Patterson said professional photo printers could make pictures that look like the ones in real science books. But those are expensive, and the school doesn't have one. Maya and Jack exchanged a look over Tyler's head, both recognizing the opportunity to support something important to the boy while also strengthening the connections between Maya and the school community. Maya's questions about printing specifications and project requirements demonstrated her growing understanding of how to be helpful without being overwhelming. "You know," Maya said thoughtfully, "I might be able to help with the printing, but I'd want to make sure we do it right. So your project represents your ideas exactly the way you envision them." Tyler's face lit up with excitement and gratitude, but Jack noticed his son's careful consideration of the offer. Tyler had learned to be grateful for help, while also maintaining ownership of his own work, a balance that impressed Jack with its maturity. That would be amazing, but I want to pay for it myself if I can. I've been saving my allowance money for something special. Maya's expression softened at Tyler's insistence on contributing to his own project. How about this? You pay for the materials, and I'll provide access to the equipment and help you learn to use it properly. That way, it's still your project, but you get the results you're hoping for. The compromise satisfied Tyler's need for independence while giving Maya a way to contribute meaningfully to his success. Jack watched the negotiation with admiration for both parties, Tyler's determination to maintain ownership of his work, and Maya's instinct for supporting without taking over. Can Dad help too? He's really good at explaining complicated things in ways that make sense. I was hoping he would, Maya said, including Jack in her smile. This sounds like a project that will need all of our different skills. As Tyler launched into detailed descriptions of his project plans, Jack found himself observing the easy dynamic between his son and Maya. Tyler had accepted her as a trusted adult who could be counted on for both practical support and genuine interest in his passions. Maya, in turn, seemed to understand intuitively how to encourage Tyler's independence while offering the kind of guidance that helped him reach higher than he might manage alone. The afternoon evolved into an impromptu planning session, with Maya's laptop open on the porch table as Tyler researched printing specifications and Jack sketched ideas for display structures that would showcase the astronomical photographs effectively. The collaboration felt natural, each person contributing their expertise toward a shared goal. This is going to be the best science fair project in the history of Cedar Falls Elementary, Tyler declared as they wrapped up their planning session. It's going to be uniquely yours, Maya corrected gently. That's what will make it special, not that it's the biggest or the most expensive, but that it represents your own curiosity and hard work. Jack felt something shift in his chest as he watched Maya interact with his son. She had the natural instincts of someone who understood children, who could encourage without pressuring and support without taking over. Tyler clearly felt safe with her, confident that she saw him as a complete person rather than just a child to be managed. That evening, after Tyler had gone to bed clutching his astronomy poster and a notebook full of project ideas, Jack and Maya sat on the mansion's front porch watching the sun set over Cedar Falls. The day's work was visible around them. New floorboards that would support countless footsteps for decades to come. Windows that would keep winter cold at bay. Systems that functioned properly because someone had taken the time to understand and maintain them. You're good with him, Jack said, breaking the comfortable silence. Tyler doesn't usually trust adults this quickly, but he's completely comfortable with you. He's easy to care about. Smart, curious, kind, everything you'd want in a kid. Maya paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. He reminds me of myself at that age, full of questions about how things work and why they matter. What happened to that curious kid? She got focused on success and forgot to pay attention to the things that actually made her happy. Maya's voice carried a wistfulness Jack was learning to recognize. It's taken me a long time to remember that understanding how things work is more satisfying than just having them work for you. Jack found himself studying Maya's profile in the fading light, noting the way contentment had softened the sharp edges of ambition he'd glimpsed during their first meeting. The woman sitting beside him seemed more grounded, more present, more genuinely herself than the successful entrepreneur he'd initially met. Are you happy here? He asked, the question emerging before he could consider its implications. Maya turned to look at him directly, her expression serious but not troubled. Happier than I've been in years. This place, these people, this work, it all feels real in a way my old life never did. Even though it's completely different from what you're used to, especially because it's different. I never realized how much energy I was spending on things that didn't actually matter to me. Maya gestured toward the toolbox, which sat open. between them like a symbol of honest work and lasting value. Your grandfather's tools will still be useful 50 years from now. Most of what I built in the tech world will be obsolete in 5. The comparison highlighted something Jack had never articulated, but had always understood: the satisfaction that came from work that lasted, from skills that remained valuable regardless of changing fashions or market conditions. Maya was discovering the pleasure of creating something tangible, something that would endure beyond quarterly reports and stock prices. Tyler's science fair is 3 weeks away, Jack said, changing the subject to something that felt safer than examining Maya's evolving philosophy of life. I'm looking forward to it, and to seeing how the other kids react to his project. Maya smiled, her affection for Tyler evident in her voice. He's going to inspire some of his classmates to think about space in new ways, just like you're inspiring him to think bigger about what's possible. Maya met his eyes, and Jack felt the familiar flutter of attraction mixed with something deeper and more complex. They were building something together, not just completing repair projects or planning science fair displays, but creating the foundation for relationships that might last far beyond Maya's original plans for a weekend retreat. The wedding ring, hidden in Jack's dresser drawer, felt like ancient history, a symbol of love that had been complete in itself, but didn't preclude the possibility of different kinds of love in the future. Sarah would have wanted him to be happy, would have encouraged him to open his heart to someone who clearly cared about both him and Tyler. The realization was both liberating and terrifying, a permission he hadn't known he needed, but was grateful to finally understand. The storm warning crackled through Jack's weather radio at 4:30 in the morning, its automated voice cutting through the pre-dawn darkness with mechanical urgency. National Weather Service has issued a severe weather warning for the Tri-County area. Ice storm conditions expected, with widespread power outages likely. Residents should prepare for extended periods without electricity or heat. Jack was already reaching for his phone before the message finished, years of experience having taught him that storm warnings in October usually meant real trouble. Ice storms were the worst coating power lines with enough weight to bring them down, knocking out electricity to thousands of homes just as the year's first real cold snap arrived. His phone buzzed with a text message from Maya, sent just minutes earlier. "Are you awake? Weather Service saying major storm coming. Should I be worried?" Jack smiled despite the early hour and the looming crisis. 3 weeks of working together had taught Maya to trust his judgment about practical matters, and she'd learned to reach out when faced with situations beyond her experience. He typed back quickly, "Yes, be worried. This could be bad. Are you prepared for extended power outage?" Her response came immediately. "Define prepared? I have food and water, but heating system is electric. Don't know what that means." Jack's mind was already racing through the implications. The mansion's heating system was indeed electric, and if the power went out for days, the pipes could freeze and burst, causing thousands of dollars in damage. Maya had worked too hard learning to maintain the house to lose it to something preventable. "Stay put," he texted. "I'll be there in an hour with supplies. We need to winterize everything before the storm hits." Tyler was already awake when Jack entered his room, the boy's internal clock having been tuned by years of his father's emergency response routines. "Big storm coming, Dad?" "Looks like it, buddy. I need to help Maya prepare the mansion for power outages. Want to come along, or should I drop you at Mrs. Patterson's?" Tyler was already climbing out of bed, reaching for his warmest clothes. "I want to help. Maya might need both of us." The drive to Hillcrest took them through streets that were already showing signs of preparation. Pete Kowalski loading extra supplies into his truck, Murphy's Diner opening early to serve coffee to utility crews, neighbors checking on elderly residents who might need assistance. Cedar Falls had weathered countless storms over the decades, and the community responded with practiced efficiency when nature threatened their collective well-being. Maya met them at the door wearing multiple layers of clothing and an expression of controlled concern. She'd clearly been researching storm preparation online, but book knowledge was no substitute for experience when facing the reality of rural emergencies. I may have underestimated what severe weather means in small town terms, she admitted, leading them inside where her laptop displayed multiple weather tracking websites. The projections are showing ice accumulation of up to an inch, with power outages potentially lasting several days. Jack examined the weather data, noting the storm's projected path and timing. They had maybe 6 hours before conditions deteriorated. Enough time to implement emergency measures if they worked efficiently and didn't waste time on non-essentials. First priority is protecting the plumbing, Jack said, setting down the bags of supplies he'd grabbed from his truck. If the power goes out and the temperature drops, frozen pipes can do more damage than the storm itself. What followed was an intensive crash course in emergency preparedness, with Maya proving to be a quick study in crisis management. They drained outdoor spigots, insulated exposed pipes, and set up battery-powered space heaters in key locations. Tyler helped by organizing supplies and monitoring weather updates, his natural competence in emergency situations impressing Maya with its maturity. "How do you both stay so calm about this?" Maya asked as they worked to secure outdoor furniture and equipment. "This is the kind of situation that would have sent me into complete panic mode 6 months ago." "Experience, mostly," Jack replied, checking the mansion's generator connections. "You learn to focus on what you can control and prepare for what you can't. Plus, Dad's really good at fixing things even when they go wrong," Tyler added, his confidence in his father evident in every word. "We've been through lots of storms together." Jack's phone began buzzing with calls from neighbors and clients, people throughout Cedar Falls, reaching out for advice or assistance as the community prepared for the approaching storm. Mrs. Chun needed help securing her greenhouse. The Andersons weren't sure their backup heating system was working properly, and the elementary school wanted someone to check their emergency procedures. "I should go help some other people get ready," Jack said reluctantly, torn between his responsibilities to the broader community and his desire to ensure Maya's safety. "But I can come back this evening to check on you." "Actually," Maya said, her voice carrying a determination Jack had learned to recognize, "what if I came with you? I could help with whatever needs doing, and I'd learn more about how the community handles emergencies." Jack hesitated, unsure whether bringing Maya along would be helpful or create additional complications. But Tyler's immediate enthusiasm for the idea, combined with Maya's obvious competence in following directions and learning quickly, made the decision easier. "It'll be a long day of moving from crisis to crisis," Jack warned. "Not glamorous work, and some of the situations might be stressful. I can handle stressful. And maybe it's time I started contributing to this community, instead of just being someone who needs help all the time." The next 8 hours provided Maya with a comprehensive education in small-town crisis management. They secured Mrs. Chun's greenhouse against wind damage, helped the Andersons diagnose a faulty backup heating system, and assisted 3 other families with storm preparations that ranged from simple maintenance to emergency repairs. Each stop, Maya threw herself into whatever work needed doing with enthusiasm and competence that surprised the residents of Cedar Falls. She held flashlights, carried supplies, asked practical questions, and demonstrated a work ethic that quickly earned respect from people who had initially viewed her as an outsider. "Your girlfriend's got some backbone," Pete Kowalski observed quietly to Jack as Maya helped lift sheets of plywood to protect store windows. Not many city folks would spend their day crawling around other people's basements fixing furnaces. Jack felt heat rise in his cheeks at the word girlfriend, though he didn't correct Pete's assumption. The truth was that Maya had become something more than a friend, but not quite what that label implied yet. Their relationship existed in a space between professional collaboration and personal intimacy that felt both natural and undefined. "She's been learning fast," Jack replied, watching Maya explain proper furnace maintenance to Tyler with the confidence of someone who had absorbed weeks of technical education. Turns out she's got good instincts for this kind of work. By late afternoon, the storm's leading edge was bringing the first traces of freezing precipitation, coating tree branches and power lines with a thin glaze of ice that caught the failing sunlight like crystal. The temperature was dropping steadily, and weather updates confirmed that the worst was still to come. Jack's phone rang as they finished helping the last family on his list. Maya Sterling's name appeared on the screen, and he felt a moment of confusion before realizing she was standing right beside him. "That's not my phone," Maya said, pulling her own device from her pocket. "Someone else is calling you." Jack answered to find Maya's business partner, David Chun, on the line. His voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to demanding immediate attention. "Maya's not answering her phone, and we have a crisis that requires her immediate input. The Singapore acquisition is falling apart, and we need her in the office first thing tomorrow morning to salvage the deal." Jack looked at Maya, who had clearly heard enough of the conversation to understand its implications. Her face showed a mixture of frustration and resignation that suggested this wasn't the first time her business obligations had intruded on her personal plans. "I'll let her know you called," Jack said carefully, not wanting to speak for Maya, but unwilling to. "Simply hand over the phone without her consent." "Let her know?" "Jack, this is a $40 million deal that's about to collapse. Maya needs to be on a plane tonight, not playing house in small-town America." The dismissive tone in David's voice sparked anger in Jack's chest. But before he could respond, Maya had taken the phone from his hand. "David, this is Maya. I'm not coming back tonight." Her voice was calm but firm, the tone of someone who had made a decision and wouldn't be swayed by pressure tactics. "Maya, you can't be serious. This deal represents 18 months of work, and without your direct involvement, we're going to lose everything. Then maybe you should have built systems that don't depend entirely on my personal involvement." Maya moved away from Jack and Tyler, seeking privacy for a conversation that was clearly going to be difficult. Jack couldn't help but overhear parts of the exchange-heated words about responsibility, commitment, and the consequences of abandoning business obligations for romantic fantasies. David's voice grew increasingly sharp as Maya maintained her position, refusing to abandon Cedar Falls and the people counting on her help during the storm. "Maya, I need you to think clearly about what you're throwing away." David's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "We've built something important together, and you're willing to risk it all for a small-town handyman and his kid?" The casual cruelty in his words hit Jack like a physical blow. He understood suddenly that Maya's business partner saw her time in Cedar Falls as a temporary aberration, a phase she would eventually outgrow when she remembered where her real loyalties should lie. Maya's response was quiet but fierce. "David, I'm hanging up now. Handle the Singapore deal however you think best, but I'm staying here where I'm needed." She ended the call and stood for a moment with her back to Jack and Tyler, clearly processing the implications of the choice she'd just made. When she turned around, her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her expression was resolute. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious emotional cost of the conversation. "Are you sure about this?" Jack asked gently. $40 million is a lot of money to walk away from." "It's a lot of money, but it's not worth more than being here when people need help." Maya looked around at the community that had been preparing for the storm, at the neighbors who had welcomed her assistance despite their initial skepticism. "Besides, I'm beginning to think there are more important things than business deals." Tyler, who had been listening with the perceptive attention children bring to adult conflicts, stepped forward and took Maya's hand. "I'm glad you're staying. Dad and I will help you get through the storm, just like you helped everyone else today." Maya's smile was radiant despite the tears threatening to spill over. "Thank you, Tyler. That means more to me than you know. As the first serious ice began falling, coating everything in a treacherous glaze, Jack realized that Maya Sterling had just made a choice that would define the rest of her life. She had chosen Cedar Falls over corporate success, community over profit, relationship over ambition. The decision would have consequences neither of them could fully anticipate. But watching her calm determination in the face of David's pressure, Jack knew she had chosen with her whole heart. The storm warning. Radio crackled again as they prepared to return to Hillcrest. Ice accumulation now expected to exceed 1 inch. Power outages may last several days. Residents should shelter in place and avoid unnecessary travel. Jack looked at Maya, noting the way she had positioned herself as part of their small family unit, ready to face whatever challenges the night might bring. The storm outside was just beginning, but something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. Maya Sterling was no longer a temporary visitor to their lives. She was someone who stayed when things got difficult, someone who chose love over convenience, someone who had found her home in the most unexpected place. Ready to weather your first Cedar Falls ice storm? Jack asked, extending his hand to help her into the truck. With you and Tyler? I'm ready for anything. The emergency generator hummed to life in Maya's basement at precisely 11:30 that night, its steady rhythm cutting through the eerie silence that had settled over Cedar Falls after the power grid failed. Ice continued to accumulate on every surface outside, transforming the familiar landscape into a crystalline wasteland that sparkled under the beam of Jack's heavy-duty flashlight. I can't believe you convinced me to buy this thing, Maya said, watching the generator's status lights with obvious relief. A month ago, I would have called it an unnecessary expense. A month ago, you hadn't lived through a Cedar Falls ice storm. Jack replied, checking the fuel gauge and monitoring systems. This generator is going to be the difference between minor inconvenience and major disaster. Tyler sat cross-legged on a storage box, his space books open beside him as he helped monitor their emergency communications. The boy had appointed himself communications coordinator, tracking power outage reports and emergency calls on Jack's battery-powered radio. His calm competence in crisis situations continued to impress Maya, who was learning that rural children develop different kinds of resilience than their urban counterparts. Dad, Mrs. Murphy just called on the emergency frequency, Tyler announced, his voice carrying the seriousness of someone entrusted with important responsibilities. She says the diner lost power and heat, and she's worried about Mr. Henderson. Next door, he's got that oxygen machine that needs electricity. Jack felt his stomach tighten with familiar dread. George Henderson was 87 years old and had been battling emphysema for the past 5 years. His oxygen concentrator required constant power, and while he had backup portable tanks, they would only last so long in an extended outage. Long do his backup tanks usually last? Maya asked, immediately grasping the severity of the situation. Maybe 8 hours if he's careful with the flow rate, Jack said, already calculating response times and logistics. But in cold weather, when his breathing gets more labored, they might not last that long. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. What would it take to get power to his house? I mean, using equipment we have access to? Jack studied her face, recognizing the problem-solving expression that appeared whenever Maya encountered a challenge worth her attention. It would require running a temporary power line from a working generator to his house. Technically possible, but dangerous in these conditions. How dangerous? Ice makes everything slippery. Power lines are down all over town, and visibility is near zero. Plus, we'd need heavy-duty cable and connection equipment that most people don't have lying around. Jack paused, seeing the determination building in Maya's eyes. Why? What are you thinking? I'm thinking about that industrial generator you showed me at the hardware store last month. The one Pete said could power half a city block, if necessary. Maya was already reaching for her laptop, despite the fact that internet service had failed, along with everything else. Didn't you say it was just sitting in his warehouse because the company that ordered it went bankrupt? Jack felt a spark of possibility ignite in his chest. That generator could definitely handle multiple houses, but getting it operational and connected safely would be a massive undertaking. We're talking about a 12-hour project under ideal conditions. What about under non-ideal conditions, with highly motivated people who don't mind working through the night? Tyler looked up from his radio monitoring, his young face bright with excitement. Are we going to save Mr. Henderson and everybody else who needs power? We're going to try, Maya said, her voice carrying the calm confidence Jack had learned to associate with their most ambitious projects. But it's going to require everything we've learned about teamwork and problem solving. What followed was 3 hours of intensive planning, coordination, and preparation that tested every skill they developed during their weeks of working together. Maya proved to have retained more technical knowledge than Jack had realized, asking sophisticated questions about power distribution, safety protocols, and backup systems that demonstrated her engineering background. The key is creating redundant safety measures, she said, sketching electrical diagrams on paper, since her computer systems were useless without internet connectivity. If we're going to run temporary power lines through a town covered in ice, we need multiple ways to shut everything down if something goes wrong. Jack found himself admiring Maya's systematic approach to crisis management. She had absorbed weeks of practical education and was now applying it to a complex emergency that would have overwhelmed most people with twice her experience. But more than her competence, he was struck by her unwavering commitment to helping people she'd known for less than 2 months. You realize this is going to be exhausting, dangerous work with no guarantee of success, Jack said, wanting to make sure Maya understood what she was volunteering for. I realize that people I care about are in danger, and we have the resources to help them. Maya met his eyes with steady determination. Everything else is just details to be solved. Tyler had been listening to their planning with the focused attention of someone who understood that adult conversations sometimes contained life or death implications. When Maya included him in discussions about logistics and safety protocols, treating him as a capable team member rather than a child to be protected, the boy responded with maturity that made Jack's heart swell with pride. I can help coordinate communications, Tyler offered. Mrs. Patterson taught us about emergency procedures at school, and I know how to use the radio systems. That would be incredibly helpful, Maya said seriously. We're going to need someone monitoring conditions and keeping track of where everyone is throughout the night. The first challenge was reaching Pete Kowalski's hardware store to access the industrial generator. Roads were impassable for normal vehicles, but Jack's truck, equipped with tire chains and emergency gear, could navigate the treacherous conditions if driven carefully. Maya insisted on coming along, despite Jack's concerns about exposing her to unnecessary risk. I know that generator specifications better than anyone except Pete, she argued, and you're going to need help moving equipment that heavy. The drive through Cedar Falls felt like navigating an alien landscape. Ice had transformed familiar streets into treacherous obstacle courses, with fallen tree branches blocking intersections and power lines draped across roadways like deadly party streamers. Maya gripped the truck's dashboard as they slid around corners, but her voice remained steady as she called out hazards and helped Jack navigate around obstacles. Pete Kowalski met them at his store's back entrance. Having monitored their progress on the emergency radio network, the hardware store owner had weathered dozens of storms over his 20 years in business. But the combination of ice accumulation and extended power outage had created conditions more severe than anything in recent memory. That generator's going to be your best bet for powering multiple houses, Pete confirmed, leading them to the warehouse where the massive unit sat waiting. But getting it operational and safely connected is going to be a hell of a job in these conditions. Maya examined the generator with the same methodical attention she brought to all technical challenges. asking Pete detailed questions about fuel requirements, electrical output, and safety features. Jack watched her process the information, seeing her engineer's mind calculate load requirements and distribution logistics with impressive speed. We'll need approximately 300 feet of heavy-duty cable to reach the houses that need power most urgently, Maya concluded, plus junction boxes, safety switches, and enough fuel to run continuously for at least 24 hours. I've got everything you need, Pete said, already gathering supplies with the efficiency of someone who understood that time was critical. But are you sure you want to attempt this? One mistake with equipment this powerful could be deadly. Jack found himself looking at Maya, realizing that the final decision would ultimately be hers. She had the resources to fund the operation, the technical knowledge to understand the risks, and the most to lose if something went wrong. But more than that, she had become the kind of person who would shoulder responsibility for her community's welfare without hesitation. We're sure, Maya said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. People are counting on us, and we have the ability to help them. That makes it our responsibility to try. The next 6 hours tested every skill they'd developed and revealed reserves of determination none of them had known they possessed. Loading the generator required Pete's forklift and Jack's truck working in coordination, while Maya calculated weight distribution and tie-down requirements that would keep their cargo secure on icy roads. Tyler proved invaluable as their communications hub, relaying updates about power restoration efforts throughout the county and keeping track of emergency calls that might affect their work. His calm competence under pressure reminded Jack that children who grew up in small towns learned early to contribute meaningfully during crises. Dad, Mrs. Murphy says Mr. Henderson's down to his last backup tank, Tyler reported as they prepared to transport the generator. She thinks he's got maybe 2 hours left before he runs out completely. The timeline added urgency to work that was already proceeding as quickly as safety would allow. Maya double-checked every connection and safety protocol, unwilling to rush steps that could result in equipment failure or personal injury. But her systematic approach was balanced by an understanding that people's lives depended on their success. The beautiful thing about this plan, she said as they began the delicate process of positioning the generator for optimal power distribution, is that once we get Mr. Henderson's house connected, we can add other houses to the same system. Mrs. Chun's place, the family with the new baby, anyone else who needs power for medical equipment or heating. Jack felt something shift in his perspective as he watched Maya coordinate their emergency response. This wasn't just problem-solving anymore. It was leadership of the kind that built communities and saved lives. Maya Sterling had evolved from a wealthy outsider learning basic home maintenance to someone who naturally took responsibility for her neighbor's welfare. You know what this means, don't you? Jack said as they worked together to splice electrical connections that would carry power to multiple houses. It means we're going to get through this storm together, Maya replied, not looking up from the precision work that required her complete attention. It means you're not a visitor here anymore. You're family. Maya paused in her work, meeting Jack's eyes with an expression that carried years of searching and months of gradual understanding. I think I've been family for a while now. I just needed to prove it to myself. As dawn approached and their emergency power grid began carrying electricity to houses throughout their neighborhood, Jack realized that the storm had accomplished something no amount of planning could have achieved. It had tested Maya's commitment to Cedar Falls and found it absolute. She had chosen their community over corporate obligations, relationship over profit, love over convenience. The industrial generator hummed steadily in the pre-dawn darkness, its steady rhythm a promise that some things could be counted on, even when everything else failed. Maya Sterling had found her place in the world, and that place was beside Jack and Tyler Mason, building something stronger than any storm could destroy. Mrs. Henderson's medical equipment beeped frantically in the pre-dawn darkness. its battery backup system finally surrendering to the extended power outage. Through the frost-covered windows of her small house, Maya could see the elderly woman's oxygen concentrator sitting silent and useless, while George Henderson struggled with increasingly labored breathing from his wheelchair beside the cold radiator. His portable tank ran out 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Murphy whispered, her voice tight with worry as she led Jack and Maya through the Hendersons' front door. I've been trying to keep him calm, but he's starting to panic about not being able to breathe properly. Jack moved immediately to George's side, his experienced hands checking the connections on the empty oxygen tank while speaking in the calm, steady voice he used for all emergencies. George, we're here to get your power back on. Just focus on slow, easy breaths while we work. Maya was already unrolling the heavy-duty electrical cable they'd brought from the generator, her movements efficient despite the tremor in her hands that betrayed her own anxiety. The technical aspects of the power connection were straightforward, but the human cost of failure made every step feel weighted with desperate significance. Maya, I need you to double-check the voltage settings on the generator while I make the house connections, Jack said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had managed countless crises. We can't afford any electrical surges that might damage his medical equipment. Already on it, Maya replied, pulling out the multimeter she'd learned to use during their weeks of electrical work. Output is steady at exactly what we need, and all safety systems are functioning normally. Tyler's voice crackled through their handheld radio from his position at the generator. Dad, Mrs. Chun just called. She says her neighbor's house is getting cold really fast, and they've got a 3-month-old baby who might need medical attention if the temperature keeps dropping. The news added another layer of urgency to work that was already proceeding, as quickly as safety would allow. Maya felt her heart rate increase as she realized they weren't just saving one life, they were potentially saving several, and any delay could have consequences she didn't want to imagine. How long to get power to the Henderson house? Maya asked, checking her watch and calculating how much time they had before other emergencies became critical. 5 minutes if everything goes perfectly, Jack replied, making the final connections to the house's electrical panel. But we need to test every circuit carefully before we energize the system. One mistake could fry every piece of medical equipment in the house. Maya nodded, understanding that thoroughness was more important than speed when lives hung in the balance. But watching George Henderson's increasingly difficult breathing, seeing the fear in his wife's eyes, made patience feel like cruelty, even when patience was the only responsible choice. George, tell me about your grandson's baseball team, Maya said, moving to sit beside the elderly man's wheelchair. Tyler mentioned you never miss a game when you're feeling well enough to attend. Her strategy of providing distraction while Jack completed the electrical work proved effective. George's breathing remained labored, but steadied, slightly as he described his grandson's pitching abilities and the team's chances in the upcoming regional tournament. Maya listened with genuine attention, asking follow-up questions that kept George focused on positive topics instead of his medical crisis. Connections ready, Jack announced, his hand poised over the main electrical switch. Maya, confirm generator status one more time. Maya keyed her radio. Tyler, how does everything look from your position? All green lights, Dad. Generators, running smooth, and I've got clear sight lines to watch for any problems. Mrs. Henderson, you might want to step back from the medical equipment in case there are any electrical surges when we first energize the circuits, Jack said, his voice gentle but firm. Maya found herself holding her breath as Jack flipped the main switch, sending power flowing through the connections they'd spent the night creating. For a moment, nothing happened, then the oxygen concentrator hummed to life, its steady rhythm immediately filling the room with the sound of restored hope. George Henderson's relief was immediate and visible, his breathing becoming easier as concentrated oxygen began flowing through his nasal cannula. Mrs. Henderson burst into tears. gripping Maya's hands with grateful intensity that spoke to the magnitude of what they'd just accomplished. "I don't know how to thank you," Mrs. Henderson whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "When we lost power, I thought I was so scared we were going to lose him." "You don't need to thank us," Maya replied, surprised by the tightness in her own throat. "This is what neighbors do for each other." Jack was already checking the electrical load on their improvised power grid, calculating how much additional demand they could handle before needing to make adjustments. "Tyler, what's our total power draw looking like?" "Generators running at about 60% capacity." Kyler's voice came back immediately. "Looks like we could handle at least 2 more houses without any problems." Maya felt a surge of pride in Tyler's competence, but also a deeper appreciation for the way Jack had raised his son to be genuinely helpful in crisis situations. The 9-year-old was contributing meaningfully to their emergency response, not just being kept busy with make-work tasks. "Mrs. Chun's house is next closest to our power line," Jack said, consulting the hand-drawn map Maya had created during their planning phase. "If we can get her connected, that takes care of the family with the baby." "What about the Kowalski house?" Maya asked, noting another location that was within range of their electrical distribution system. "Pete's got his own backup generator for the hardware store, and he's using it to keep his house running too," Jack explained. "But there are at least 3 other families within our range who could benefit from what we're doing here." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders as she realized how many people were counting on their improvised emergency response. The technical challenges were manageable, but the human stakes made every decision feel momentous. "How do we prioritize?" she asked, recognizing that they couldn't help everyone simultaneously. "Medical needs first, then families with small children, then elderly residents who might have trouble maintaining body heat," Jack replied without hesitation. "It's the same triage system the emergency services use, just applied to power restoration instead of medical treatment." Tyler's voice crackled through the radio again. "Dad, I can see Mrs. Chun waving from her front window. Looks like she's got her flashlight set up as a signal." "Tell her we're on our way," Jack replied, already gathering the additional cable they'd need to extend their power grid. "Maya, are you ready for round 2? Maya looked around the Henderson house, noting the steady operation of George's medical equipment and the grateful relief on both elderly faces. This was what meaningful work felt like, not managing abstract data systems or optimizing corporate profits, but directly improving people's lives in ways that mattered immediately and completely. "I'm ready," she said, shouldering her share of the electrical cable. "Let's go save some more neighbors." The next hour blurred together in a series of technical challenges and human connections that tested every skill they'd developed while revealing new depths of determination Maya hadn't known she possessed. Each house they connected to their emergency power grid represented not just restored electricity, but renewed hope for families who had been facing increasingly desperate circumstances. Mrs. Chun met them at her door with tears of gratitude. Her 3-month-old grandson finally sleeping peacefully in a warm house instead of crying from the cold that had threatened his fragile health. The young parents next door expressed amazement that complete strangers would work through the night to help people they barely knew, a reaction that reminded Maya how rare such community support was in most places. "This is what I've been missing my entire adult life," Maya murmured to Jack as they completed the electrical connections that would keep the baby's house warm and safe. "The feeling that what you're doing actually matters to real people in immediate, tangible ways." Jack paused in his work to study Maya's face, noting the exhaustion around her eyes, but also the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful accomplishment. "You've found your calling, haven't you?" "I think my calling found me," Maya replied, watching Tyler coordinate their next connection with the competence of someone twice his age. "I never would have imagined that learning to fix houses would teach me how to fix myself." As dawn broke over Cedar Falls, painting the ice-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Their emergency power grid was providing electricity to 6 houses and ensuring the safety of more than 20 residents who had been facing potentially life-threatening conditions. The industrial generator hummed steadily in the growing light, its reliable rhythm a testament to the power of community cooperation and individual determination. Maya stood beside Jack and Tyler, surveying their night's work with a mixture of exhaustion and profound satisfaction. She had found her place in the world, and that place was here helping people she cared about, solving problems that mattered, building something stronger than any storm could destroy. The sun had fully risen over Cedar Falls by the time Jack made the final connection to the elementary school's main electrical panel, sending power flowing through the building that served as the community's emergency shelter. Maya stood beside him, her hair escaping from its ponytail and her work clothes bearing the honest stains of a night spent crawling through basements and wrestling with heavy equipment. Powers holding steady across all 6 houses. Tyler reported from his position monitoring the generator, his young voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned his place as an essential team member. And Mrs. Murphy says she's got hot coffee ready for anyone who wants it. Maya felt tears threaten as she looked around at what they'd accomplished. The garage light that had started everything still glowed steadily in the distance, but now it was joined by lights in windows throughout their neighborhood, evidence of restored hope and renewed safety for families who had been facing crisis just hours earlier. "I can't believe we actually did this," she said, her voice carrying amazement and exhaustion in equal measure. "When David called last night, he said I was throwing away everything important for a romantic fantasy. But this is more real than anything I've ever done." Jack moved to stand beside her, noting the way morning light caught the auburn highlights in her hair and emphasized the determination that had carried them through the night's challenges. Maya Sterling had proven herself in ways that mattered more than any business success or professional achievement. "David was wrong about something else, too," Jack said quietly, his voice intended for Maya alone. "This isn't a romantic fantasy. What we have, what we've built together, that's as real as anything gets." Maya turned to face him fully, her dark eyes reflecting the same mixture of exhaustion and deep satisfaction that Jack felt in his own chest. They had worked together through crisis, trusted each other with life-and-death decisions, and discovered that their partnership extended far beyond learning basic home maintenance. "Jack," Maya began, then paused as Tyler's excited voice cut through the morning air. "Dad, Maya, come see this." They hurried to Tyler's position at the generator, where the boy was pointing toward the elementary school's playground. The broken equipment that had inspired Maya's renovation plans was now clearly visible in the morning light, its rust and deterioration highlighted by the ice coating that made everything sparkle like crystal. "Look at the swings," Tyler said, his voice filled with wonder. "The ice made them look like they're made of diamonds." Maya studied the playground with an engineer's eye, but also with the perspective of someone who had learned to see potential in broken things. "You know what? I think this is exactly the right time to start the renovation project. The community just came through a crisis together, and now we can give them something positive to focus on." "The ground's going to be frozen for weeks," Jack pointed out, though his tone suggested he was working through logistics rather than raising objections. "But we could use that time for planning, ordering equipment, maybe even getting the kids involved in designing what they want their new playground to look like." Tyler's excitement was immediate and infectious. "Could we really let the kids help design it? I bet everyone has ideas about what would make the playground amazing." "I think that's exactly what we should do," Maya said, her fatigue disappearing, as she embraced this new project with characteristic enthusiasm. "A playground designed by the children who will actually use it, built by the community that will maintain it." Jack found himself smiling despite his exhaustion, recognizing the pattern that had defined Maya's time in Cedar Falls. She identified problems that mattered to people she cared about, then threw herself into solving them with competence and determination that transformed good intentions into meaningful results. "Mrs. Patterson is going to love this idea," Jack said, thinking of Tyler's teacher and her constant efforts to provide enriching experiences for her students despite limited resources. She's been talking for years about getting the kids more involved in community projects. Maya was already pulling out her phone to make notes, despite the fact that most communication systems were still down. "We'll need to coordinate with the school board, get proper permits, maybe even organize fundraising events so other families can contribute to the project." "Maya," Jack said gently, recognizing the signs of Maya's project planning intensity building toward potentially overwhelming levels. "You know you don't have to fund the entire playground renovation yourself, right? This community is perfectly capable of supporting projects they believe in. I know that. But I want to contribute more than just money." Maya gestured toward the emergency power grid they'd created, toward the houses where families were now safe and warm. "I want to be part of building something that will last, something that will make life better for people I care about." Tyler had been listening to their conversation with the focused attention he brought to adult discussions that might affect his own life. "Maya, does this mean you're definitely staying in Cedar Falls? Like, permanently?" The question hung in the morning air, weighted with implications that went far beyond playground projects or community involvement. Maya looked at Jack, then at Tyler, then at the neighborhood they'd spent the night protecting from storm damage. "Tyler, I think I've been staying permanently for a while now. I just needed to be sure that Cedar Falls wanted me to stay." "Of course, we want you to stay." Tyler's response was immediate and emphatic. "Right, Dad?" Jack felt something fundamental shift in his chest as he looked at Maya Sterling exhausted, ice-covered, more beautiful than any woman had a right to be after working through the night in crisis conditions. She had chosen their community over corporate obligations, had risked her safety to help neighbors she barely knew, had proven herself in ways that mattered more than any resume or bank account. "Tyler's right," Jack said, his voice carrying emotions he was still learning to acknowledge. "We want you to stay. I want you to stay." Maya's smile was radiant despite her fatigue, transforming her entire face with joy that seemed to light up the ice-covered morning. "Then I guess the only question left is whether you want me to stay as your friend and project partner, or as something more." The directness of her question caught Jack off guard, but in the best possible way. Maya Sterling had never been someone who avoided difficult conversations or left important things unsaid. She was asking for clarity about their relationship, with the same straightforward honesty she brought to everything else. "Maya," Jack said, stepping closer and taking her ice-cold hands in his own, "I've been hoping for something more since the day you said I was handsome while I was standing on that shaky ladder." "Really?" "Because I've been hoping for something more since the moment you started teaching me how to fix things instead of just doing it for me." Tyler looked back and forth between the adults, his young face bright with excitement and satisfaction. "Does this mean Maya's going to be my new mom?" The question created a moment of wonderful awkwardness, both adults laughing at Tyler's typical 9-year-old directness about complex emotional situations. "I think we should probably start with Maya being someone very special to both of us," Jack said carefully, "and see how things develop from there. But you like each other, right? Like the way grown-ups like each other when they want to get married and live together?" Maya knelt down to Tyler's eye level, her expression serious but warm. "Tyler, I care about you and your dad more than I've ever cared about anyone. I don't know exactly what that means for the future, but I know I want to find out together." Tyler considered this with the gravity he brought to all important family discussions. "That sounds good to me. And I think Mom would like you a lot, which means it's okay for Dad to like you too." Jack felt tears threaten at his son's wisdom and generosity, at the way Tyler had given him permission to open his heart without feeling disloyal to Sarah's memory. The boy understood love in ways that many adults never mastered, recognizing that the capacity for caring could expand rather than simply transfer from one person to another. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their moment of hum. Emotional breakthrough. As utility trucks began arriving to assess storm damage and begin the process of restoring power to the broader community, Maya and Jack's emergency response had been successful, but it was temporary. Professional crews would now take over the work of permanent repairs. "I guess our all-night crisis management shift is officially over," Maya said, watching the utility. Workers begin their systematic assessment of damage throughout Cedar Falls. "Our crisis management shift, maybe," Jack replied, pulling Maya closer as Tyler ran to greet the arriving workers with his characteristic enthusiasm for meeting new people. "But everything else is just getting started." Maya leaned into Jack's embrace, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers and the steady rhythm of his breathing that had become so familiar during their weeks of working together. The garage light continued to glow in the distance, steady and reliable, a perfect metaphor for the love that had developed between them, practical, dependable, and bright enough to guide them through whatever challenges the future might bring. "Jack?" Maya said softly, her voice carrying a contentment she'd never experienced before. "Yes, I love you. I love you too." The words were simple, honest, and absolutely true. They had found each other in the most unexpected way, had built something real through shared work and mutual respect, and had proven their commitment when tested by genuine crisis. The garage light glowed steady in the morning sun, and so did the love between the woman who had stopped chasing fortune and the man who had never stopped chasing hope. 6 months later, Tyler's new telescope sat proudly on the deck of Hillcrest Mansion, its gleaming chrome and precision optics catching the late afternoon sunlight that filtered through the oak trees. The boy knelt beside the instrument, carefully, adjusting its position to track a planet that wouldn't be visible for another 3 hours, his movements deliberate and reverent. "Are you sure Jupiter will be right there at 8:30? Maya asked, settling into the deck chair beside Jack, with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She wore a simple sundress and work boots, a combination that had become her signature style since making Cedar Falls her permanent home. "Tyler's been tracking planetary positions for weeks," Jack replied, accepting his coffee with a grateful smile. "If he says Jupiter will be visible at 8-30, you can set your watch by it." The transformation of the mansion grounds was evident everywhere Maya looked. The playground project had expanded beyond the elementary school to include a complete renovation of Hillcrest's own outdoor spaces, creating areas for both active play and quiet contemplation. Tyler had designed a small observatory area where the new telescope could be positioned for optimal stargazing, while Maya had added raised garden beds where she was learning to grow vegetables with the same methodical approach she'd once applied to data systems. "Mrs. Patterson called this morning," Maya said, settling against Jack's shoulder in the comfortable intimacy they'd developed over months of shared mornings. Tyler's science fair project won first place at the regional competition. They want him to present it at the state level next month. Jack felt pride swell in his chest as he watched his son make final adjustments to the telescope's position. Tyler's solar system project had evolved into a comprehensive exploration of space exploration technology, incorporating both the astronomy, books from Maya's library, and hands-on engineering principles he'd learned during the playground construction. "He's been working on that presentation for weeks," Jack said. "Maya, I can't tell you how much it means to him that you've been helping with the technical details." "It means a lot to me, too. Tyler's curiosity about the universe reminds me why I fell in love with engineering in the first place." Maya paused, seeming to savor both the coffee and the peaceful afternoon. "Before I came here, I'd forgotten that learning could be joyful instead of just strategic." The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their quiet conversation as members of the community began arriving for the evening's stargazing event. What had started as a casual suggestion to share Tyler's telescope with his classmates had evolved into a monthly gathering where families throughout Cedar Falls came together to explore the night sky and share potluck dinners on the mansion's grounds. "Maya! Jack!" Mrs. Chun called out, carrying a covered dish toward the deck where folding tables had been set up for the evening's meal. "I brought that Korean barbecue you liked so much at last month's gathering." Maya rose to help with the food preparation, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had found her place in a community that valued contribution over credentials. The monthly stargazing events had become one of her favorite activities, combining her love of learning with her growing appreciation for the simple pleasure of shared experiences. "How's the playground project coming along?" Mrs. Anderson asked, settling her own family's contribution to the potluck buffet. "My kids are so excited about the new climbing structure. Installation should be finished by the end of next week." Maya replied, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone whose plans were coming to fruition. "Tyler and his classmates did an amazing job designing equipment that will challenge kids of all ages." Jack watched Maya interact with their neighbors, noting how naturally she had integrated into the social fabric of Cedar Falls. The woman who had once managed corporate acquisitions worth millions of dollars now took equal pride in organizing community events and coordinating volunteer schedules for playground construction. "Dad, can you help me with the telescope's finder scope?" Tyler called from his position beside the instrument. "I want to make sure everything's perfectly aligned before people start arriving." Jack joined his son, enjoying the ritual of telescope preparation that had become a beloved part of their evening routine. Tyler's passion for astronomy had deepened significantly since gaining access to professional quality equipment. But more importantly, his confidence in sharing knowledge with others had grown as he'd watched Maya integrate learning and teaching into community building. "Tyler, you know what I'm proudest of about your science fair project?" Jack said as they fine-tuned the telescope's positioning. "What's that, Dad?" "Not just that you understand the technical details, but that you can explain them in ways that help other people get excited about space exploration too." Jack ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "That's a real gift, and it's something you learned from watching Maya share her knowledge with all of us." Tyler beamed at the comparison to Maya, whose opinion had become incredibly important to him over the months of their growing relationship. "Maya says the best way to really understand something is to teach it to someone else who's curious about learning. Maya's a smart woman. That's one of the reasons I asked her to marry me." Tyler's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "And she said yes. So now we're going to be a real family, all three of us together." The engagement had been announced just 2 weeks earlier, during a quiet dinner where Maya had presented Jack with a ring she'd designed herself, a simple band incorporating metal from his grandfather's.